Este para mí es uno de los discursos más poderosos que he escuchado. El primer ministro de Canadá, Carney, dio una poderosa charla en la Universidad de Ottawa ante un grupo de estudiantes. Estuvo tan llena esta charla que tuvieron que habilitar un salón adicional. Carney habló sobre el futuro de Canadá, cómo Canadá va a continuar manteniéndose fuerte y cómo Canadá va a contraatacar cualquier ataque del régimen de Donald Trump. Creo que cuando ves este discurso, y lo digo porque seleccioné los puntos más importantes del discurso, verás cómo se ve el verdadero liderazgo mientras este hombre conmueve al público. Y también te vas a dar cuenta cómo Carney se planta frente a Donald Trump sin ningún miedo. Este discurso lo da a vísperas del presupuesto federal que está por darse el 4 de noviembre. Carney dijo que este discurso se vio casi como un estado de unión para los que lo estaban viendo desde Estados Unidos. Él dijo, este es un momento bisagra en nuestra historia como canadienses, y todos estamos siendo convocados para trabajar juntos ahora, mantener fuerte a Canadá y proyectarla hacia un futuro exitoso. Miren, por favor.
And I've learned a few things since I graduated, and I've increasingly understood this point that, life doesn't proceed in a straight line. And that the history and the progress of nations are punctuated by hinge moments. Times when the future literally hangs in the balance and when our actions can be decisive.
Luego Carney habla sobre los cambios que están ocurriendo y contrasta los que él vivió cuando él salió de la universidad comparado con los que enfrentan los estudiantes hoy en día. Habló de que cuando él salió de la universidad el mundo dio un giro gigantesco y todo se estaba moviendo a favor de la democracia. Ahora vemos que hay fuerzas que se están moviendo en la dirección opuesta, y los canadienses están siendo llamados para enfrentar estas fuerzas autoritarias, a resistir este fascismo que se ve en Estados Unidos y en otros lugares. Mira este poderoso momento, por favor.
The world is more dangerous and divided. The US, as we all know, has fundamentally changed its approach to trade. It's raising its tariffs to levels last seen during the Great Depression. And the scale and the speed of these developments are not part of a smooth transition, they're a rupture. And they mean that our economic strategy needs to change dramatically. And they mean as well, even though we both lived through I lived through times of immense change, your future will not be the same as my past. Because my time as a student was marked by events of a similar magnitude, but in a very different direction. When I was your age, the Berlin Wall fell, leading to a long period of liberalization of the movement of goods, capital, and people, leading to a peace dividend.
Luego Carney dice, seamos realistas, la relación de Canadá con Estados Unidos jamás va a volver a ser lo que era antes. Despídanse por completo de la relación que tenía Canadá con Estados Unidos porque nunca más va a volver a suceder. Miren, por favor.
Because of these advantages, over decades our economy grew steadily more integrated with the United States through the Free Trade Agreement of the 1980s, the NAFTA Accord of the 1990s, and eventually USMCA agreement signed in 2018. Canada's trade increased by over 400% during that period, and our economy doubled in size. But this process, this decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship with the United States, is now over. And as a consequence, many of our former strengths as a country, former strengths more particularly as our economy, strengths based on close ties to America, have become our vulnerabilities. And as a result of that, the jobs of workers in our industries most affected by the US tariffs in autos and steel and lumber are under threat. And our businesses are holding back investments restrained by the pall of uncertainty that's hanging over all of us. Our relationship with the United States will never again be the same as it was, even though in this new world of protectionism, we have the best trade deal of any other country, and we're working to make it even better still. Now, at the same time that all of this is happening, technology is changing the way we work, live, and communicate. When I was in graduate school, the World Wide Web as we then called it. It was that was the modern term of the information superhighway, if you ever heard of that. The World Wide Web, as we then called it, was just beginning. We used pen and paper in class. We talked on the telephone to each other. And we talked about the same news stories, the same movies, the same bands. My generation was connected by wires, yours is connected by code, and yet our society today is becoming ever more disconnected. Our public square is fragmented by online echo chambers, where truth and fiction can be hard to tell apart, and where contrasting ideas tend to polarize, not persuade. Now, in the context of all this, as Canadians, we have relearned some key lessons over the course of the past year. First, we have to take care of ourselves because we can't rely on one foreign partner. We have to take care of each other because we are stronger together. And we've learned that now is not the time to be cautious because fortune favors the bold.
El primer ministro de Canadá, Mark Carney, dice que de las cosas más importantes que tiene Canadá no solo es su fortaleza económica, ni su fuerza militar, ni nada por el estilo. Dice que son los valores y principios que defienden en Canadá. Y él dice, ¿sabes por qué nosotros defendemos estos valores y principios? Pues lo hacemos porque sabemos quiénes somos. Y eso es lo que nos hace más fuertes en todos los aspectos. Miren por favor.
Our government has the fiscal capacity to act decisively, and we must draw on these strengths now. Our second advantage is that Canada has the values to which the world aspires. Canada has always been, and we always will be, committed to fundamental human rights, to human dignity, and to individual freedom. We are a pluralistic society. Our cities are the most diverse in the world, places where people bring the best of their cultures.
Y mientras uno ve este discurso, yo creo que todos pensamos, wow, así se escucha un verdadero líder. De hecho, si nos ponemos a analizar, esto suena bastante como suena el gobernador de California, Gavin Newsom. Y también suena bastante similar a ciertos gobernadores demócratas del país. Pero los contrastes entre los discursos de Mark Carney de Canadá y Donald Trump son gigantescos. Es por esa razón que te quería compartir esto, porque la verdad esto no lo vas a ver en ningún otro canal. Sabes, la verdad es que ni siquiera ningún medio tradicional estadounidense comparte esto con el público. Luego, el primer ministro Mark Carney habla sobre cómo en Canadá construíamos, explorábamos y que según él se necesita recuperar ese espíritu. Mira por favor.
We used to build things in this country. We can build again. We used to explore this country. We can chart new courses again. We used to take big, bold risks in this country. It is time to swing for the fences again.
Luego el primer ministro Mark Carney habla sobre cómo las Fuerzas Armadas y la industria en Canadá ya no deben de depender de Estados Unidos. Canadá necesita fabricar su propio armamento. Canadá necesita crear su propio acero. Miren este momento tan poderoso, por favor.
Our strategy will recognize that in today's global economy, we have to build sustainably. It's not just a moral duty, it's also an economic imperative. It is a moral duty, but it's an economic imperative. Now, above all, we will build Canadian. The new security threats the world is bringing to our shores means we're making the biggest investments in our military in generations. But up until now, more than 70 cents of every dollar of military spending, military capital expending by our government goes to the United States. With our new Defense Investment Agency, we will make sure we build more of our security and defense capabilities here at home, creating new careers in aerospace and shipbuilding and cyber and AI for Canadian engineers, technicians, and scientists. It's the same thing in steel. Consider that, well, 80% of the steel that Europe buys is manufactured in Europe. 75% of the steel that the US buys is manufactured in the US. Only 40% of the steel that we use is made here. That doesn't make sense. Not when we have the people, the resources, and the companies to build right here in Canada. So our upcoming budget will move forward with our Buy Canadian policy, prioritizing Canadian steel, aluminum, lumber, manufactured good, and technology for Canadian projects. And with new orders for homes, infrastructure, and defense equipment becoming orders for Canadian suppliers. We will be our own best customer. So the welder who's working on a contract in St. John's can get a full-time job.
Aquí tenemos más del primer ministro Mark Carney. Mira, por favor.
Now, our partners around the world are already taking note of new Canadian ambition. Last month, we signed a historic free trade deal with Indonesia, the world's fourth largest country by population. We've just signed foundational agreements with the United Arab Emirates in AI and with the EU in defense and trade, and with Germany in critical minerals. We're re-engaging with global giants India and China while we deepen our partnerships with our traditional allies. And to build on this momentum, I'm going to put it in context. Our goal for Canada is to double our non-US exports over the course of the next decade, generating more than $300 billion more in trade. And that's new orders for Canadian resources, technologies, and expertise. Now, we spoke of protection and building. We move to empowering. Each of you in this room and in the overflow room, each of you is here to get an education that you need to go out and build the future that you want. To be empowered with a better shot at the life you want for yourself and your family. We will keep building a country where more people have more of those opportunities. Now, we need to be clear-eyed about where we stand today so we can build for tomorrow. Let me give the current economic context. I'm channeling my old central banker days here. Look, the situation in Canada now, the actual situation is that the rate of inflation has come down. It's come down sharply. But it's also the case that the cost of living is still far too high. It's also the situation in Canada right now that we're building a lot more homes. Housing starts are up this year. And affordability of those houses are improving. But it's still challenging. We need to build many, many more homes, and we need to build them a lot faster. This government is getting immigration under control, with asylum claims down by a third and new temporary foreign workers down by more than 70% this year. To match immigration levels with our needs and our capacity to welcome them, this budget will include Canada's new immigration plan to do better for newcomers and for everyone. It's also the fact that in this economy, we are creating jobs as a whole across it. And it is a fact that we are forecast to be the second fastest growing economy in the G7 over the course of the next 2 years. Even though some critical sectors, I mentioned earlier, autos, steel, lumber, forest products, aluminum, and some regions are facing big, big pressures. So the facts are that at present, despite everything, despite these big changes, our economy is holding up. But it's equally true that if we don't act now, these pressures will only grow. And more fundamentally, our goal is not just to do reasonably well, but to grow stronger than the rest of the G7. And as we work to do so, I want to make this promise to Canadians. I will always be straight about the challenges that we face and the choices that we must make. And to finish, because we're all in this together, I ask you to get involved. The fact you're here this evening, we do many other things, shows that you're interested in being involved. Get involved. Look out for each other. Look after each other. I know from the history that I read in university and the history that I've lived since graduating, that fortune truly does favor the bold. And the hinge of fate will turn on what Canada does right now. We're going to have to change how we do some things. But we will never change who we are. This moment has revealed, yes, the limits to our economic independence. Limits that we must tackle head on, and we will. But more importantly, what it's revealed is a nation that's more determined, generous, hardworking, compassionate, and ambitious than any other on earth. We are Canada strong. Canada fort. Vive le Canada.
Y bueno amigos, yo acabo de cumplir con mi misión, que es informarlos, como lo hago absolutamente todos los días. Como siempre te digo, para mí lo más importante es tu opinión y me encantaría que la pongas en los comentarios. Además, si este video te gustó, te va a encantar suscribirte al canal, ya que subo videos como este todos los días. Mi nombre es José Alvarado, soy economista y estoy comprometido para informarte diariamente. Nos vemos en el siguiente video. Adiós.